Hey everybody, Mike Miller with the Herald Times. Jeremy Price, the columnist here, coming to you from Assembly Hall after Indiana's season opener, a 88-49 win over a overmatched Eastern Illinois team.
Yes, indeed.
This one was over pretty quickly.
It was.
Big first half run really set Indiana ahead for what was a 49-17 halftime lead. I believe at halftime, Indiana's bench had as many points as Eastern Illinois did, those 17.
Yes.
Really a runaway victory, but yet I think there were some pretty valuable takeaways. Just to start, I think just the energy that kind of produced a pretty impressive rebounding effort.
Yeah.
I think Indiana out-rebounded them 51-17. 21 of them came on the offensive glass. It was sustained effort, too. I mean, this was something that they were doing in the second half as well. And it wasn't just the post. I mean, guards accounted for, I think, 19 of those rebounds. So it was coming from all directions.
Yeah, I think a couple of things when you look at it. First of all, just for overall score-wise, it was a much more dominant performance than anything we saw in the exhibitions, and I think there are a couple of things that contributed to that. First of all, I don't think Eastern Illinois has the cohesion or sort of the culture built in that either of the teams that Indiana played in the exhibition games does. So they were sort of a little more susceptible to those kind of big runs and things. They just kind of weren't established. They had a couple players that were known quantities, but the rest of it they were still very much trying to figure out.
9 newcomers.
Yeah. So I think that contributed a little bit to it. But I think the other part is what you said, is the sustained energy and effort by Indiana. It was a much more focused effort than really in both exhibition games. There were lapses and times where you felt like they just kind of lost focus, lost interest, just, couldn't sustain what they were doing well at times in those games. And tonight they did those things. The activity on the glass was the big thing that jumped out tonight. But again, I mean, they only gave up 49 points. And, don't get me wrong, Eastern Illinois is not going to be the most powerhouse offensive team that Indiana sees this year. But still, the fact I think that matched the lowest Indiana allowed all last year. So, I mean, that's a sign in the right direction, at least for the opening game.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't a perfect defensive game by any stretch of the imagination, especially when you looked at the way they were calling fouls throughout this game. I mean, for a time there in the first half, it seemed like we couldn't go 20 or 30 seconds without one team or the other being whistled for a foul. And it would have been easy for Indiana to give up points at the free throw line, but they seemed to make the adjustment that Eastern Illinois didn't, and actually only committed 2 fouls, I think, over the last 8 minutes of the first half, which was when the bigger part of the run took place that really put this game out of reach.
Yeah. Coming from a lot of different directions here in this one. I think, first of all, Thomas Bryant made his presence felt here. He kind of, I'm trying to think of a word to describe his exhibition performance here. His first 2 unofficial games at Assembly Hall. Nothing too impressive, more pedestrian than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
But tonight, he kind of just feeds the energy that this team can hope to play with, hope to establish early this year. I mean, no one really brings the energy level that Thomas Bryant has brought through these first 3 games, exhibition or otherwise. I mean, even when he wasn't playing well, he was still bringing energy in those exhibition games. And I think that does bode well for this Indiana team moving forward. I mean, at no other point last year did they have anyone capable of bringing that to the game. I think the most demonstrative player on the team otherwise might be Nick Zeisloff, but to actually get a key contributor, a guy at a critical position, a guy who can help you in so many ways, who's going to be relied on in so many different ways this year, I think that's just huge beyond anything he's giving you in the box score, which is obviously going to be huge too.
Yeah, and it wasn't necessarily big box score contributions. As a matter of fact, I mean, really, his big box score contributions tonight came in 2 waves, basically right at the beginning of the game and then kind of midway through the second half, I guess, basically. But I think like one of the things that stood out to me was Bryant was responsible for picking up, I think, 4 of the first 5 fouls on Eastern Illinois tonight, just guys trying to battle him in the post or trying to keep him off the glass, those kind of situations. And that's where, again, just if he's active and involved in any way, even if he's not touching the ball, it's still a big help for this team. And then in the second half, it was like they kind of went, oh yeah, we've got this big guy, we might ought to try to get the ball in the post just a little bit or get him involved. And all of a sudden there was a stretch where there was this concentration on getting Thomas Bryant the ball, and he had some success, and then everything else spun off of that. Then some three-pointers came, some stops came, some transition points came. It's just amazing sort of how everything just spreads when he gets involved in the game in any way, shape, or form.
Absolutely correct. James Blackman led the way with 17 points. Yogi Ferrell had 13. At one point, as you mentioned on Twitter, the only drama left in the game. I think this went down to maybe 5-6 minutes left.
Yeah.
Maybe even later than that, was seeing if Ferrell could extend his national best among active players, national best streak of 65 consecutive games with a three-pointer. He did. He had he had one for 5, so now he's up to 66 straight games with a 3. He finished with 13, and Robert Johnson and Troy Williams each had 12, and that's especially encouraging when you see that production from Johnson coming off the bench of Indiana's 34 games last year. The guy started 33, and if he's someone who can come off the bench, bring some consistency, bring some energy, that bodes well for this Indiana backcourt, especially when you kind of talk about some of the concerns with depth this year.
Yeah, I think the two things with Robert Johnson is one, I think Tom Crean mentioned it post-game, that he feels like Johnson is one of this team's best defenders, and I think he is, and he showed flashes of that last year, but he still was a freshman many times in terms of getting himself out of position or allowing guys to get to spots on the floor where they wanted to get to, and if he can clean that up this year, I do think he can be an effective defender. But the other thing is, especially now that he's coming off the bench, Indiana really needs him to be efficient in terms of his shots, and he's not going to get a high volume of shots with this team, I don't think, but he's got to be able to knock down a pretty good percentage of the shots he does take, and tonight he knocked down 4 3-pointers coming off the bench, and if they can get that to go with what they've already got with Yogi and Blackman, Zeisloft also coming off the bench, and the other guys they've got, it just adds another dimension, and I think already this year he's shown himself more capable of running the point guard position as well. So.
Yeah. They have a couple guys who can do that, a few guys. Heck, a guy who was doing that late in the game was OG Anunoby, who gave him some good minutes there in the second half.
I don't think you want to do that regularly.
No, you don't want to do that regularly. I think the point about OG Anunoby right now is that he's giving you, effective minutes here and there. And the interesting thing is, they've kind of talked about this is a guy who can create his own path to the court if he kind of understands the strengths, understands what Indiana needs from him, which is rebounding, energy, and defense, which with his 7'6" wingspan, he's kind of a natural at that. But right now, he's still kind of just relying on that natural athleticism, much the same that a lot of freshmen would. But he's still doing it in a way that is, mostly effective.
Yeah, I think the thing with OG is he wants to play to his strengths, but at this point, you want him to do that without having to overthink it in the process.
Yeah.
So when he's just playing on instinct and playing free and just kind of flowing with the game, that's when he's at his best, where he's able to get out in transition, he's able to be active on the glass, create something on defense, just sticking those hands in. I mean, he just has a knack for finding the ball defensively, I think, that few people on this team do.
Yeah.
And so from that standpoint alone, I think he's just got to see the floor once in a while to just see if he can create something.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And Jim Harbaugh was here. Jim Harbaugh got here in the second half of the game and sat down and watched the ball game. Watched the game that was already far decided back in the first half at some point. I'm not going to talk much about Jim Harbaugh. Anything else, Jeremy? What are we wing these things. We don't plan anything. We just kind of wing it.
Tim Priller scored. First time since the season opener last year.
Did he have points last year?
He scored against Mississippi Valley State in the opener last year. Yes.
Oh, gosh.
That was when he and Jeremiah April both scored. You weren't here for it,
I missed that game. No, I was.
You were gone for football.
Yeah.
And turns out we saw something that you never got to see again.
I've never seen it. I barely saw that. I looked up after he had already scored because I was writing my first story of the night, and I heard the roar of the crowd. I said something along the lines of, I think the loudest cheers of the night came when Thomas Bryant picked up a technical with less than 8 minutes to go. Just the fans bought the dunk he did, and just the kind of the taunting he gave the Eastern Illinois player afterward. Loud cheers, big ovation, and then Tim Priller came in, and the roof nearly fell off. Well, we shouldn't say that because that's
not in this place.
Not in this. Yeah. Anyway. We're back at it really soon. Monday, very quick turnaround. Austin Peay is here. This is one of the preliminary games for the Maui Invitational. It has no bearing whatsoever on the Maui Invitational, but it's one of these packages of games that kind of comes with it. So it'll be Austin Peay in here.
And Austin Peay, for what it's worth, is in the same conference as Eastern Illinois,
Yep.
but finished quite a bit below Eastern Illinois last year.
It's the Ohio Valley Conference Tour coming through Bloomington this year.
Yes.
Unfortunately, it is the lower tier of teams coming through Bloomington, but it'll pick up by next Thursday. Get Creighton in here. We'll probably see an interesting game, to say the least, and then you head to Maui. So we're going to start hitting it pretty quickly here with the season. We're underway now.
In the meantime, you can see Jim Harbaugh again tomorrow.
See Jim Harbaugh tomorrow, yes.
Or later today, depending on what time you watch this.
It's getting close to that. Anyway, we'll see you tomorrow with football. Jeremy, we'll see you on Monday. Thanks, guys.